Charles Manson.
Charles Manson.
Charles Manson.
A killer who didn't kill anyone himself, but his words led to 9 brutal murders.
He was a very powerful person. When he said jump, they jumped.
There was 5 people, I believe, killed here.
5 were killed in one night. Sharon Tate, 8 months pregnant, stabbed 16 times. Pig written in blood. The next night, Leno and Rosemary LaBianca. Dozens of stab wounds. War carved into flesh. He didn't kill with his hands. He commanded others to do it. More than 50 years later, the echoes of Charles Manson's madness still haunt Los Angeles.
Hidden above the hills of Los Angeles once stood a twisted sanctuary of control, manipulation, and murder. This is the site of the old Spahn Ranch, where Charles Manson carved out his plan to wreak havoc on the city of Los Angeles in 1969. Welcome, everybody. I'm Tom Zenner on Tom Zenner Scandal, host of One Degree of Scandalous, with the one and only Kato Kaelin. And Kato, we find ourselves in very interesting locations because we love bringing people, our fans and our viewers, to these sites of the most notorious and famous crime scenes in Los Angeles and throughout the country. This is one of the big ones. This is Spahn Ranch. We've all heard about it, but are you here for the first time?
First time ever. It's gorgeous, actually. I could see why Manson would want to start a cult here. It's like, this is a gorgeous area with the rock formations and the Spahn Ranch. And it was George Spahn, right?
Yeah, George Spahn. And
no relation to Warren Spahn, the baseball player.
I don't think so.
Okay,
I don't think he had quite the curveball. You know, everybody's heard of this area. If you follow true crime, if you watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the Quentin Tarantino movie with Brad Pitt and Leo, it's an eerie vibe out here if you know what took place back in the late 60s. And this is a very secluded area. We're going to cover it so you can kind of see, but this is it. This is where these cult members would go in. Charles Manson himself came up with all the plans. This is where he formed this cult and rehearsed some of these murders and left here on the night of some of the murders, including the Sharon Tate murder.
Do you know what I included in all this sort of, Tom? That Roman Polanski was Sharon Tate's husband. You know, she was pregnant at the time. And I always relate to murders in Los Angeles because I came across Peter Bogdanovich. That was in the 90s, and Peter Bogdanovich had Dorothy Stratton. Dorothy Stratton murdered by Paul Schrader. That's the film Star 80 with Eric Roberts. And it's all kind of connected, and that's why I always think like these directors, they seem to go after, and they both were playmates. It's a bizarre world. Margot Robbie played, you know, Sharon Tate.
Yeah, so this is like not far from Simi Valley. This is far into the valley, the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles. Chatsworth is probably the nearest suburb here. That's the home of porn, basically, Chatsworth. But George, why don't you come show our viewers here a little bit, just kind of take some views back here. The ranch would have been back there, 55 acres. It was a movie ranch, and they filmed Bonanza and The Lone Ranger there back in the day. But this is the Manson family headquarters from 1967 to 69. And, Kato, this is where, you know, everybody's heard of Helter Skelter. And that was his basic, you know, the race war that he wanted to ignite. And he would, you know, he would convert these people into basically cult members. He would radicalize these young people. Tons of drugs, hallucinogens. Right. And this was crazy town, and it is kind of scary when you think about what went on back there.
It was the era of hippie, and it was easy to manipulate these because they were homeless, basically. He gave them a place to live, and Spahn, the ranch, was great, and so obviously that Manson drugged them and persuaded them, kind of a hypnosis, to do the evil that they did. And the names are, I think, Susan Atkins, Squeaky Fromm, still living today and trying to get parole. And, you know, Tom, you mentioned Helter Skelter. Vincent Bugliosi was a person I got to meet, and his wife, the late Vince Bugliosi. And I just remember growing up, it kind of ages me, but I saw Helter Skelter. I saw that based on the Bugliosi book. And the best today, we've seen, there's so many films on Manson, but Stephen Railsback played Manson. And it was so bizarre when he had it wasn't a pentagram, it was the cross, the X, or whatever on his forehead. But I'll never forget that when the line that I used in my all friends would say, "I'm not dead, I'm already dead." He would repeat that, but over and over. That was I guess it's sort of the first film ever on that bizarre incident of Charles Manson.
So Kato, you mentioned George Spahn. Okay, that's who it was named after, the Spahn Ranch. And he was elderly. You saw it in the movie. I think it was fairly fairly accurate in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood because he was this decrepit old man. And Manson actually used sexual favors of his followers, these young females, and they would coerce this guy into allowing them to do whatever they were doing here and try not to raise too much commotion, right? Even though the FBI ended up getting a beat on this and investigating it for a while, this is where this secluded area where they could come and have all day, all night to do their drugs and make their plans and gather their weapons and rehearse and then use this as base camp when they would head out into Los Angeles, into the Hollywood Hills and wherever they went and commit these murders.
Well, and Cielo Drive is where the murders took place of Sharon Tate and the Folgers there, but Abigail Folger. But do you know that that was when Manson had been to the house before? Someone else was living in it. That's why he went back to that house. And another thing I don't think people realize, there's so many great documentaries, is he was a recording artist. And he was on the cusp of possibly becoming a hit artist because he sold something to the Beach Boys, Brian Wilson, if I remember, and they loved it. I think they recorded it. So whatever happened in between the interim with the management, whatever, I think it could have pushed him over the edge, that this is his song, and that was recorded. He has an album that was out.
Here, we're gonna walk over this way, George, follow us, but here's the thing with the Beach Boys, Kato. I don't know if Charles was actually that good of a singer, right? Because he had that bitterness against that music executive, and that you're gonna find out on one of our next stops on its tour. We're going to 5 stops today. We're gonna go to a couple murder scenes. We're gonna go to a famous restaurant in a famous theater. This is gonna be an exciting and entertaining and informative and kind of chilling tour that we're gonna take you on today, starting right here at Spahn Ranch. And I mentioned this was a staging area, and they departed right here from Spahn Ranch when they committed the Tate and LaBianca murders, right? So this is where they would head out from. And then they go do their thing, and all this violence and just torture and chaos, and then they'd come right back here, get high again, and probably celebrate. These people were nut jobs, man. But this is the spot where he radicalized these young people and turned them into just crazed killers that would follow every word he said. He had that power.
That was kind of one of the first trials ever too, where it wasn't live, but there were news cameras that were always catching him walking into the courtroom, whatever, and his fame, I guess, grew, and his craziness, and he had unfortunately, he had a huge following, and people loved Charles Manson.
Yeah.
Still today, we're talking about it.
And this is a huge area. Unnavigable, really? I mean, there's no reason to come here. I mean, there's nothing living back there, maybe some goats, some coyotes or something. But legend has it that Manson buried weapons out here, possibly other bodies were buried out here. And then a fire, I think it was in 1970, destroyed Spahn Ranch for the most part. So it looks nothing like it did 50 years ago or whatever that was. But this is the area right here. And it's kind of almost appropriate that it's an ominous day. It's dark. I was expecting it to be about 80. It's about 57 here in the valley, where it should be like 80, 85 already at this time of the year. But,
for our viewers, by the way, if you have, when you watch this, if you have your favorite, I mean, there's so many documentaries, so many films about it, including the Tarantino film. What is your favorite one? What do you think it depicts the best one of Manson? Like I said, we've had so many detectives on this. I don't know if Tom Lang worked, he was kind of in that era though, but let us know, because Tom and I love going to locations where this craziness took effect. As you know, people love the Richard Ramirez, and I think you're going to love this just as much.
Yeah, and this was right up Manson's alley, because if you think about it, the 60s was a free time. It was a happy experiment. And Helter Skelter and Manson murders, that pretty much put the end of it in the late 60s. And that was his intent too, because things shifted in the 70s. But this was a metaphor, basically, this Spahn Ranch, this area, for what he saw in his worldview, which was decaying of glamour, right? And chaos and those types of things. And this fit right into it. And think about it. He gets his cult followers here, these young hippies, basically, get them hooked on drugs. They listen to any word he says, and they would take out any marching orders he said. He didn't commit any of the actual murders. He was involved in a few of them, but as far as the actual murders, it was his henchwomen and henchmen that did all the dirty work.
And this guy was about like 5'5", 135 pounds.
Nothing.
So it's just, it's amazing that the power he had in his words. And a lot of it, Tom, is basically, it really was at that era with the Beatles, the Doors, it was really music related. And it was all about music. And if had he become a star, who knows what would have happened.
I don't think he had star potential. I don't. I mean, I think he thought he did. I think he was delusional in regards to that.
But he had enough. He had enough for an artist like don't forget the Beach Boys in the 60s were gigantic. So he had enough. And how did he get to meet these people? It's just, it's an amazing story.
Yeah. I never liked the Beach Boys.
Yeah.
I don't like their music. I'm flip. It's almost like Adele. If I hear an Adele song, it's gone. Well, if I hear an Imagine Dragons song, it's gone. If I hear a Beach Boy song, it's gone.
Right.
I don't like their music at all.
I like two, that's it.
Okay.
But I was not a Beach Boy guy. I just like two. And speaking of the Beach Boys again, the big hit they had was in a movie in the 60s that was kind of in the era with this, was called Shampoo with Warren Beatty, Julie Christie. And it was all about an election, but that was in 68. This happened in 69. So it really is all connected.
Yeah. George, why don't you work a little bit and get some more shots of the background here? You know, Quentin Tarantino obviously paid homage to this and tried to be as accurate as he possibly could with the movie in 2019. And that was definitely a part of the plot, though, the music situation with Manson. And that will play into this tour that we're giving you, because I think in his mind that he legitimately thought that he was a good singer, could have been a recording artist, but he was more intent on murder. I know everybody that's watching this around the world and around the country finds this fascinating when we come to these spots. We did it with the OJ saga last summer. We did it with the Night Stalker earlier this month. Me too, man. I'm a true crime enthusiast. This is our life. This is what we do. And to think that we're standing right here, one of the infamous, this is one of the top 5, just like the Night Stalker. This would be on the Mount Rushmore of horrific crimes, borderline serial killers. And if they hadn't have stopped them, who knows how much longer he would have gone.
And as you know, a little surprise in our tour, we're going to be going to a place that I've actually been to quite a few parties.
Oh, is that right? The Playboy Mansion? I didn't know that was on the list today.
No, something that's even bigger than the mansion.
Okay, we'll keep that under wraps. I want to get out of here. Okay, I've seen it. I've been here. I know what happened here. I'm ready to get back into civilization and take you to site number 2. We're heading to the site of one of the murders. Come along with us. All right, nestled in the remote hills of Topanga Canyon is a house with an owner, a peaceful owner who was definitely in the wrong place at the wrong time, although he could have been targeted. We are at site number 2.
Yep.
Kato, this is the home of Gary Hinman, who was the first murder victim of the Manson clan. Charles Manson was here on this site, walked right up that paved driveway right there, right where we're standing. This is actually a murder site that Manson was on, and this one was horrific. It was a bloodbath. We're going to get into the details, but here we are, Kato. You would think we're in Lake Tahoe or something. Yeah. This is as remote as you can get.
Let me, Tom. So Tom and I have navigation. It was impossible to find this place. 1969. I don't know how smart they are, the Manson clan, the whole thing. How they found these places, I have no idea. From the last location to this location, it took us a good hour. How did they find these places? And he found it, obviously, and committed the murder.
Yeah, we're not dealing with rocket scientists, the Manson followers, and they're on LSD and drugs half the time too, but they had a point to come here. They knew him. There's a lot of theories of motive that goes around this. One was they knew who Gary Hinman was, this peaceful music teacher, and he may have had an inheritance that they were going after. These sick twists weren't exactly contributing to society and drawing a salary anywhere, like the Night Stalker. They'll steal, they'll do whatever they have to do. They would go through garbage.
Money related.
But this one is pretty horrific because, who's going to hear you out here? If you scream, hell, we can't even get a phone signal here in 2025.
It's pretty incredible. You know what? Also, because our show deals with so many of these true crimes stories, we had, for instance, my God, it's slipping my mind, up in John Holmes, the Wonderland, also in a canyon. Isn't it strange that everything's kind of canyon related? Yeah. And California, these canyons, it's like remote areas to murder, and maybe that's the reason you can't hear someone scream. Possibly that's why these murders are committed.
Well, keep in mind, Manson and his crew were here for multiple days. This was almost a hostage situation, and Manson was involved in this one. He sliced him with a sword, and Gary Hinman, who lived here, was tortured. You know, he was held captive. He
3
was
days,
tortured.
right? 3 days.
And then his body wasn't found for several days later. Yeah, and they couldn't even pinpoint the exact day that he was murdered. It was like July 27th or through the 29th of 1969. But this is where they came for their first killing. And there's slopes, there's hills, there's birds. But how do you get to the grocery store, you know, on a regular basis if you're here, or to the gas station? There's nothing convenient about living up here. George, if you want to just take a little look around here, the house, you know, there's obviously different owners. It may have been renovated, but this is the area, man. This is where they came to kill.
And George, you probably know this while you're filming this. This seems like it would be a horror film. This area is perfect for a horror slasher type film. You know, Tom, Gary Hinman was a UCLA, I believe, a music teacher.
I know he's a music teacher. I don't know where.
Pretty much everything revolved around music again. So who's to say what Manson was in for? Was Manson? Did he write with this guy? Did he have some kind of music deal? Did they do drugs? I mean, we don't know. But it was, I believe, money related.
Yeah, and then think about it. When you mention music, you have the Beatles singing "Helter Skelter."
Yeah,
you know, a famous song. Yeah, so music does play into this. Counterculture, hippies. This is the hippie culture. These are flat out hippies that Manson chose as his followers. And it's not like Gary Hinman, the murder victim, was a celebrity or a millionaire or anything. He may have had that inheritance, but it wasn't like a Sharon Tate, who was one of the biggest movie stars of the time.
Right.
And it wasn't like the heirs to the Folgers fortune, where we'll be heading very, very soon.
Yeah.
So you talk about, I mean, this looks like the scene of a horror movie, right? Where a killer, the Manson crew, would come and you know, just create carnage at an epic level. And this is where they got that taste for blood, right? Because they're out at Spahn Ranch practicing this, rehearsing, talking about it, you know, doing all their drugs. They think anything's possible, and now they got away with it. They came here, nobody saw them, they get away with the killing. They're writing on the wall with blood. That's where they started doing that right here.
And you think about that, the murders that did happen, you've got these small females too. You think there's probably no threat. Little did they know what drugs probably what did to them, and the committed murder. Tom, 4 words we keep repeating over and over, and the 4 words that seem to come for every crime scene we do. It's wrong place, wrong time. Isn't it sort of the wrong place, wrong time for so many of these people? The Tate, Hinman, just any of our shows. Wrong place, wrong time always is the 4 words that always stick out in my mind.
Even if they were coming here with the sole intent of killing Gary Hinman, whether they were trying to get a ransom, whether Manson had a beef with him, they crossed paths somehow. What if he's not here? Then what happens? Do they go back to Spahn Ranch and try another day? I mean, so many of these circumstances have to fall into place for these murders to occur. These dipshits don't get caught, they don't get seen, they don't pass out, they don't fall off one of these cliffs. You know what I mean?
You know what? And what Tom and I are doing is like I said, it took us over an hour to get here. It's just amazing, and we hope the viewers appreciate this. It's amazing of how a guy like a Manson and his followers, how they found these places, how long of a drive it was, and you know, just getting here, it still blows me away because they're not smart. There's no navigation. Did they have a Thomas Brothers map? Did they find these? Sometimes it's just dumb luck.
Yeah, we made the drive here, and it takes a while. It's not easy. And keep in mind these crime scenes, when investigators would finally get there, the detectives, you have a decomposing body because he'd been dead for several days, and you know, just seeing the blood. I think it said "political pig" written on the wall.
Yeah, that's where it started. I think the whole thing of Manson leaving little clues, and then obviously at the Tate house, pig was written all over.
And this is a hippie culture out here in Topanga Canyon. You know, if you want to get away from the hustle and bustle of the city life, you want to get away from Beverly Hills, the studios, and a more quote unquote peaceful existence, this is it. This is where a lot of hippies used to live back in the day. And again, Kato, if we just plopped ourselves right here, you could think we're in Georgia.
This is up north Wisconsin. This is up north Wisconsin,
Michigan, right? This is not adjacent to LA. That's not the vibe you're getting. People come here to not be seen, to lay low. There's nothing convenient about living up here. And this is where they came. Charles Manson, who was actually here, a lot of times he wasn't involved in the murders. He would just send his psycho troops out to do the dirty work, and they would. But on this one, he was here. They saw him. He was ruthless with that sword, and they got a taste of that killing. They were probably freaking out, celebrating. These people they're nuts. I mean, these are nut jobs. And And a lot of them, some of them have died, but there's still some that are on death row and trying to get out on parole. And Sharon Tate's family is, very aggressively making sure that that doesn't happen. But here in California, it's not like they've been executed.
Yeah, I think they're going to die of old age or something in prison. I don't think the death penalty will happen for them. And by the way, this is a wildlife sanctuary. I don't know if you know. This is where wildlife is a whole sanctuary. It's right there, George. You get a shot. It actually says it. This is true.
Yeah. We're going to do more episodes, Kato, on Manson here. And it would be really cool. We'll dive into some of the killers and, how they felt after this. Because they were on drugs. They were in a cult. And again, this doesn't justify anything or make any excuses for them. But can you imagine the regret? If they're 17, 18, 19 years old, they're very impressionable. Charles Manson had some powerful spell cast on all these people. You mix in LSD and all the other drugs that they were taking back then, and
basically, Tom, they're homeless. They had no family life, and Manson became their father figure and boyfriend figure, or whatever it was. And his words and the drugs taken, he could just sort of, like I said, hypnotize them. Yeah,
and he tried to create this family atmosphere right at Spahn Ranch. They would live in these old abandoned buildings, sets for some of the westerns that they shot out there. They had George Spahn, the owner of the ranch, under their spell too, and he was old and decrepit, so he couldn't do much about it. So these people were users. They would take advantage of any situation they could because Manson really wanted to start this Helter Skelter race war. So he was selling something that they were buying. They were buying into that from Charles Manson. And this is the spot, Kato, I'm into history, right? I'm into pop culture like all of our viewers. These are the steps, man. These are the steps that killers walked right up here. And they entered this house and they got in, and this peaceful dude, Gary Hinman, never wanted to bother anybody. Can you imagine you're there alone? You got these psychopaths in the house and Charles Manson,
I think
coming across with a sword.
I wonder at what point though, like a Hinman knows this is going to be trouble. I think he probably opened the door for them.
Oh, good Lord. He had to know right. I believe Charles Manson shows up at your door. That's not good.
Right.
But he's not selling Manson.
Wasn't there a relationship before?
Yeah, well, true. But again,
so I'd open the door.
Well, okay, I get where you're going, right?
Yeah.
So you're thinking that maybe he knew him and that allowed him to open the door and get them in?
I think he let him in, and the furthest thing of his mind that he was going to be slashed, killed.
My thought is, well, I don't know, so I don't really want to figure it out too much. But my thought is, he sees Manson. Manson's scary looking. If he shows up at night, that can't be good. And then if he's got those wacko followers to the side of him, probably already tripping out and acting, just bizarre and freaky. Holy crap, he may be trying to shut the door, block them. I don't know if he had a gun. I'm sure he wish he did. But, 3 days of hell going on in here.
And most people don't know this actually took place because everybody in the murder trial, it was related around Sharon Tate, Roman Polanski. It was just because of celebrity.
Right.
So this was kind of overlooked, but it's, as the Beatles said, Helter Skelter, I got blisters on my fingers. So I don't know what that is a reference to, but that's the end of the song.
Yeah. So this is it. The first murder victim. This is where the Manson clan felt that they could get away with anything they wanted. They came in here, wreaked havoc, and then they were on to their next murder shortly after. Now, thank God this whole killing spree didn't last long, right? But this is where I'm sure authorities are trying to figure out what the hell went on here. Let's try to piece this together. Is it connected to anything that we've been investigating? And I'm sure they were all worried when you see a message on the wall that says political blood. That's not random. You're thinking, is there going to be political pig is what they wrote on the wall. Is there going to be more? When's the next one going to occur? And as you're going to find out, we'll tell you on our next spot.
Yeah, well, also real quickly, don't forget this is 1969, where these crimes took a long time to figure out. Had these happened like today with the technology, this is probably found out in a day or two.
Okay, George, while you're here, just take a look, go down the street. Maybe we'll just walk with you a little bit and we'll just show people what this is like. It's the middle of the day here.
Look at this.
Yeah, not the back of Kato's head, George, the neighborhood. Thank you.
My head looks like the cactus too. Look at this beautiful cactus.
What is that? Okay, someone's pushing a bike up that driveway. These trees are beautiful.
I don't think it's a drive. I think it's I don't know if it's a park or something, because look at this. Is that someone's house?
I don't know. That is
They got
bizarre.
the Buddha out there, Tom?
They got an American flag here. We got Buddha up against the cliff there. We got some cactus.
Like you said, Tom, this is like a retreat, either spiritual or whatever it is, but it gives that feeling of hippie.
Yeah. You know, if I had, you know, $300,000 budget, I wouldn't mind talking to some of these neighbors and finding out if any of them were around back
Watch
then.
out for a car.
Yeah, I don't want to be another victim here. Yeah, sharp turn there. So this is it, guys. Someone lives in this house. I don't know about you, Kato. I have no desire to live in a house where murders like this occurred, because over the last 50 years or so, people talk about the fact that there's some weird, there's some weird vibes here.
You could not survive here, and I'll tell you why. There's no cell reception. There's no cell reception for this guy.
Yeah.
He would be here an hour and go, I gotta go.
I'm gone. Put it on the market. And anybody watching this probably feels the same way as me, unless you like this remote vibe and you want this to get away from the craziness of LA. This is your spot. But if not, we're going to head back more towards the Hollywood Hills. Right. We're heading where the celebrities lived. One of the biggest celebrities of the day lived, and where the Manson family thought that they could carry this carnage on. And unfortunately, they were successful. But I hope you're enjoying this tour. Drop in the comments, right, Kato?
Helter Skelter,
Yeah.
please do it. I got blisters on my fingers.
Way to bring levity to a horrific crime scene.
I'm bringing the song. It's
Yes, I know.
You got to know the end of that song. It's kind of spooky.
Yeah. And you have to do that now, too, because we're here in a historic spot of one of the biggest stories of the 60s. Started right here. It would end soon, but we're going to the next spot where the carnage continues. Come along with us. All right, we're now in Benedict Canyon. It's one of the most exclusive, glamorous neighborhoods in all of Los Angeles. It is where Sharon Tate lived. She was a rising star, a Hollywood beauty, married to one of the most famous and influential directors at the time, Roman Polanski. And this, everybody, is Cielo Drive. This is the road, the pathway that Manson's clan came on his command to commit probably one of the most famous and horrific murders that this country's ever seen.
Well, actually, my car is parked on the road that leads up to here, exactly where they parked their car when they ran down. You know, what's really interesting is that this is a private drive, and we came up here, and of course, it's a landmark, and you can't. The roads are like you're in Italy. They're only this much room, and Tom and myself and George, our camera person, we got kicked out. A woman threatened us and said you can't. Well, she threatened it, just said you can't film, which I get it, but you know what? Like Tom just said, he goes, hey, you chose to live here.
Yeah, you know, that's how I feel, man. If you live, you know, 2 doors down from where this happened, people are going to show up.
And she didn't realize that I kind of upped her one. I said, well, I know someone that lives there. And I actually was in that exact house, the Sharon Tate, Roman Polanski house where the murders happened. I was there for a few times for a party. The new owner took it over, a great guy, Jeff Franklin. Jeff is one of the greatest. He started Full House with Bob Saget and John Stamos and Dave Coulier, the Olsen twins. All of them were, you know, Jeff would throw the best parties. And he used to have John Stamos. Here's the connection. John Stamos would drum at the party there. And guess who was at the party? The Beach Boys.
Of course, because he's the drummer for the Beach Boys. So I figured that,
It's all a tie-in.
Yeah.
And so Jeff owns us. I actually have a coffee mug, Tom. If you remind me tonight, take a picture of El Cielo for one of the movies. They gave out coffee mugs to the Manson, one of the many films that were out there. So they passed out coffee cups and these unusual cookies. And I was there. But the house is amazing. It is just redone, revamped. It is twice as big as the mansion, the Playboy Mansion, and it's just gigantic. So, you know, being in that, and everybody, like I said, it was a large party, but everybody had the same kind of feeling of this is where that iconic murder happened of the Manson, the Manson murders, Helter Skelter, took place right here, El Cielo.
Yeah, okay, so you've heard of Benedict Canyon probably. This is a glamorous area. You can see why people want to live here, Hollywood stars, they're all over here, because there's privacy. It's not easy to get to. It's not as remote as where we were before, where the first murder occurred. But here, I'm just going to walk a little bit up Cielo. George, if you don't mind following us just a little bit here. And then if you turn around, George, you can get a shot of the sign that says Cielo. I don't know if you can see it from there.
I think, George, instead of getting that shot of it, Cielo, you should get the sign that says dead end.
Yeah.
It kind of tells you everything right there.
So this was August 9th, 1969. The murderers came in here. They cut the phone lines. They snuck up the embankment behind the house. which is at the end of this street, maybe what, 300
Right.
yards, maybe 300 yards,
Right.
something like that.
And you mentioned August 9th, of course, that's in LA. That's very hot. So obviously the doors are probably open,
I'm not
windows
sure.
are probably open.
I don't know about
Easy
that.
access.
I don't know about that because they would have just broke in or done whatever. But they did get in. Tex Watson was the guy that led the assault, and when he came in, he said, "I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's business." And again, like I mentioned, Sharon Tate was 8.5 months pregnant. This is as sick as you can possibly imagine. And this, and they say that it was this murder that ended the innocence of the 1960s.
Yeah.
Right? Because you know, there's no safe place for people to hide here, right? You could be a victim. Evil is out there in the form of Charles Manson and those whacked out, freaking murderous
whacked
psychos.
Whacked out so badly that Sharon Tate pleaded for the life of her baby, 8.5 months of being pregnant, and the murderer, of course, said that they killed the baby and they're going to take the baby out and murder. So, like, these are the most grotesque murders, and yeah, the innocence of the 60s kind of ended in 69 with that, of going into the 1970s, this horrific murder.
Yeah, and not to get into too much detail, but you know, there was 5 people, I believe, killed here, and 4 of them were led into a room, tied up, watching this insane violence, and then being basically tortured to death. Yeah, it's just, George, take a look at these canyons and everything. It's a really, like, kind of it's beautiful. It's a cool, picturesque vibe here.
And I believe, Tom, that Abigail Folger was the one that got stabbed and ran, and she almost made it out
Yes, she
down
did.
to the bottom of the cliff, but she didn't get it because they caught her and stabbed her even.
Yeah, 28 times she was stabbed. Everybody's heard of Jay Sebring, right? He was a prominent character in the movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And he was actually shot. He was trying to protect Sharon Tate.
Tex Watson.
Yeah, so this was mass carnage, you know, at the highest level, and it freaked everybody out because once the details, the crime scene was so bad. Once again, they wrote with Sharon Tate's blood on the wall, pig. And can you imagine the murderers leave here and they go back to Spahn Ranch, and that's where they dump their bloody clothes. They actually dumped the murder weapons not too far from here,
right.
And then they were able to find them. Authorities and
on
detectives,
Canyon.
yeah, they were able to find them.
And also, what the point I was going to make is, you know, Tom and I were talking at the last location. I said these locations are so impossible to find, even today with the navigation, the Waze, whatever you have in your apps. That in 1969. Just the wherewithal of how they knew to find this place. And Charles Manson actually was at this house before the murders because he dropped off his music, thinking that the person that used to live there was still there.
Yeah.
There's been so many different movies made about this with different endings. Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood had a complete different ending where they all get killed. The people that are going to murder Sharon Tate, with Brad Pitt, of course, with the flamethrower. And there's another film that had another opposite ending. I can't remember the name of it, but that was a screening that I went at and received the El Cielo coffee mugs.
So Terry Melcher's the guy. He was the music executive that Manson wanted to, you know, have him lead him to some sort of music career, because like we talked about earlier, Manson had this notion that he was some like up and coming musical talent, right? And he must have really believed it. You know, you don't know how much you can take from, like, say, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which was a great movie. It was a great movie, and the way they portrayed Charles Manson. Obviously, there was an alternative ending to that movie. What really happened? I wish that would have been the ending. Yeah, that'd have been cool. You know, Brad Pitt up here somewhere and having his Dobermans just attack, and that would have been amazing. But this is, again, this is one of those sites that if you follow true crime, if you're into this, obviously you are. If you're watching this, you know, this is one of those spots that everybody knows about, where you know the horrific nature of what occurred. And to walk here, if you have respect, you know, for history and for these lives and how just unbelievably horrific and scary it had to be for them, because they're coming in there and they're just nuts. And they're screaming probably, and they're trying to create the mass amount of chaos that they possibly can, and fear. And then again, you have this satanic element like we had with the Night Stalker talking about doing the devil's work.
Yeah, this is in LA, if you know this, Tom, but every Halloween around there, people gather here, people gather at the Wonderland, people gather with the Night Stalker. It's just bizarre, because of true crime, and people have become somewhat, you know, LA, you feel automatically kind of related to it. But the bizarre thing is, I could never see myself living in a place where a mass murder happened.
No.
It's I just, in my mind, I can't make it happen. Maybe I'm a chicken, whatever, but it's goosebumps. It's just goosebumps.
Yeah.
It's just.
Well, think about it. You're walking.
Could you do it?
I don't think so. You're walking around that house at night. What if you're alone and you're thinking, what happened in that room, in this room, you know, in the front door? Who entered into that front door? There's just too much of an eerie vibe there, spirits and whatnot. And plus, you know, you don't have like, you know, you're not living in a cul-de-sac here in a busy neighborhood. I mean, this is, you know, fairly remote here in the Hollywood Hills. Beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, the security comes by here probably every hour. On this street is so private that there's stop signs on the street below. Not one person since our talking has stopped at it. They just run right through it because it's like I said, it's private, and they just roam through it. And boy, these are multi-million dollar homes.
The original address where Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski lived was 10050 Cielo Drive. When they tore down the house and rebuilt it, they changed the address. They didn't want anything to do with that. So it's now 1066 Cielo Drive.
Yeah.
But it's dramatic. Like at the end of this cul-de-sac, we've got the cover video to show you. It's dramatic. I mean, those gates, it's almost like opening up into a scene from hell, right? Those gates open up. It's the only gate on this street.
The house is completely redone, but still, it's the land that's on there. And you know what? It reminds me of another story. Is the Rockingham, OJ's house, completely, you know, redone. And there was no murder at Rockingham, but the whole thing is, it's bizarre. People just want to lose that memory, so they tear it down completely, build up a new house. And this was pretty much the same thing. By the way, it is beautiful. And the views.
Yeah, so the 60s, you know, that was peace and love, right? It all ended really August 9th, 1969, because the horrific nature of the crime, the fact that she was targeted, whether she was or not, he wanted to make a statement by killing a Hollywood star, and her, you know, obviously if Roman Polanski had been in town, he was in London shooting a movie, but if he had been in LA, he'd be another victim that night.
Which is, another statement I want to make. No one, and I don't know if there's anything on YouTube, our viewers don't know, you never hear about that from Roman Polanski all these years, a sit down of what he went through. And, you know, you really never hear about that. He has a baby that's dead, he's got a wife that's dead, and best friends that are dead.
Well, part of the problem was, obviously, he couldn't come back to the United States, right? He was in Europe because of rape charges, of a minor. So Roman Polanski, you know, was stuck, where was he, in Poland or whatever, for so long.
I think, he was filming, but...
No, but because he was arrested, right? He was charged with statutory rape, essentially, so he could not come back into the United States, and he didn't for a very, very long time. So, like I said, they leave here, and again, Spahn Ranch is a long way from here, and there's a lot of winding roads. If they don't know the neighborhood, because we're not dealing with rocket scientists here, they're not part of the Mensa Society, okay? You know what I mean? You got drugs. You know, these people are just not bright to start with. They're under the influence of Charles Manson. I don't think they're really good at navigating. Like, how long would it take them to get back to Spahn Ranch? That's a lot of gas.
Yeah, and I believe if that was, I get mixed up now with the story of the movies and reality, and I think another person was murdered on the way down, correct?
Yeah, the first guy, he was the first person killed. His name is Stephen Parent, right?
Yeah.
And he was here, he was 18 years old. He was here visiting the caretaker.
Tex Watson.
And then, I'm not sure who shot him, but he was shot. He was the first victim, and then they come into the house.
Right.
And then you have Abigail Folger, right? So think about that. Everybody, and back then instant coffee was a big deal. Folgers. The best part of waking up is Folgers in your cup. Who doesn't remember that jingle, right? So people had that instant coffee. That's, you know, this.
Well, it's a billionaire family.
Yeah, if you equate it now, they'd definitely be a multi-billionaire family. Yeah. So this was extreme wealth. It represented everything that Charles Manson and his cult and his followers wanted to destroy. Right? Privilege, wealth. You know, he wanted to initiate this race war through Helter Skelter and create fear. Thank God they stopped him.
Yeah, and
man,
we don't know the reason behind it, but it could have been a bad music deal. You never know. We'll never know.
Yeah, it would be interesting to talk to someone that's really in the record industry, and I know some people. Remember when we had my friend Tom Sturgis on?
Yeah.
Who's discovered so many huge stars, worked for Universal and Chrysalis. He was the president of both. I'm going to talk to him sometime about, okay, what was the word about Charles Manson's talent as a singer? Because you get the vibe that he really thought he could have been something. And I mean, that's your alternative Charles Manson? Like, if I can't be a rock and roll star or a singer and a recording artist, I'm going to turn into what I did.
Well, I heard some of the music and I thought it wasn't bad. I mean, come on, Bob Dylan, it was just as good, if not better. I mean, by the way, I'm not a Manson fan, but I did hear some of the music and I was like, okay, if I didn't know that was Manson, I'd say this guy was a decent artist.
Yeah.
Decent voice, but we'll see.
Susan Atkins is one of those, she was one of the killers, and she was the one that wrote the word pig in Sharon Tate's blood, and she's been on death row for a very, very long time. I mean, just imagine Sharon Tate's family having to live with this, and then some of these people who are still alive that are in prison, you know, they come up for parole, they're trying to get out, they act like they've been rehabilitated, I don't know. But wow, they've had a hell of a long time, Kato.
Yeah,
you know, a hell of a long time, 56 years to think about what they did and the spell that Charles Manson cast on them to turn them into vicious murderers.
Yeah, I believe in my heart that Susan Atkins has forgot about, you know, I think she realized this huge crime, but after 56 years, I think her mind is like matured and she's like, what in the hell did I do?
Yeah. Yeah, so tell me more about these parties you went up to. Would you guys talk about the fact that, I mean, everybody knew, but was that a topic of conversation when you were in there?
Well, the person I was dating at the time had no idea, and I had explained to her, and she creeped out. But yeah, everybody else at the party, like I said, it was Stan was on drums there because he had a band there, and Jeff's a fanatical on Elvis. Very, very big Elvis fan. He was serving peanut butter and bananas, and also ordered donuts everywhere. Great, like I said, great guy. But the party was jam-packed. Everybody was aware of, you know, it was a huge Hollywood party, celebrity-filled, and yeah, everybody would talk about that. This is way before all the movies, but it was Helter Skelter, basically. We're at the Helter Skelter. This is like, and they actually, I think, played it that night. Who knows?
You know, you and I talk about we'd never want to live in one of those houses. Clearly, he made that choice to do that. Did he seek this out when it was for sale? Did he get a good deal? Did you guys ever discuss how he ended up here?
I didn't know. I know. I just was saying, what a great house, and you know what? It was a great party.
Well, that's good. And I'm glad we can have a little bit of a, you know, a lighter moment here, considering what happened at the end of this path. But this is it. I think we've covered it all from this site.
Yeah, I think what we should do is, you know, we've been talking about this Hollywood and all that, and at the time in the 60s, there was a one-of-a-kind theater. One-of-a-kind theater because it was a globe, and no one ever, you know, it became part of Hollywood also. Tom, do you know what I'm talking about?
Are you trying to, I actually do. Good setup. I do.
Cinerama
No,
Dome.
that we're gonna lighten this tour a little bit and go to a kind of a cool spot. You saw it in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It's a Hollywood landmark. We're gonna go and tell the story of the Cinerama Dome, and that's where we're gonna head next. George, you okay? I know we freaked you out last week with the Night Stalker. Now we got you here. We got you at these sites of Helter Skelter. Are you having nightmares? Are you okay? Do I need to get you a teddy bear? Are you all right?
We're good.
Okay, I don't mean to subject you to all this.
George is fine.
A little bit of therapy, but we're good.
Okay, George, hang in there. We got one more spot. Load us up with
Cinerama.
comments, everybody. We're glad we could take you on these visits, right? And, you know, all we're trying to do is just, you know, just take a snapshot, take a picture, let you know how we feel being here because, you know, we're representing you doing this, right? Because everybody's interested in this story in true crime, and we're just trying to share with you what it's like all these years later, over half a century later.
Yeah, I think the viewers also, I love going on these tours because it's stuff that I haven't seen and stuff that I have seen, but it's great here. And I've been, you know, Tom, I've been following Tom on all the drives here. And if I was CHP, Tom would have gotten at least 4 tickets already. You on the freeway, you know, you almost hit that. Are you on the phone or you swerved into a lane? The guy's beeping the horn. He swerved. I mean, I was like, Tom.
Are you on LSD, Kato?
No.
I don't. I'm a good driver. I'm great.
He is a good driver, like Dustin Hoffman was in Rain Man.
Hey, we made it here. We've made it to all these sites.
Let's go see a movie.
Okay, we're gonna lighten it. This is Cielo Drive. This is the site of one of the biggest true crime stories in the history of the world. And we're gonna take it one more spot on this tour today. All right, our last stop on the tour today is not a crime scene. It is a cultural cathedral. It's right behind us, the Cinerama Dome, right here on Sunset Boulevard in West Hollywood. And Kato, this was built in the 1960s to represent the optimism of the time, as well as kind of the globalistic future of the film industry here in LA, and a big part of the movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, which does a great job of having a happy or less depressing ending to the Sharon Tate story where it was played by Margot Robbie. But Quentin Tarantino loves this theater. He wanted to turn it into a museum, single theater, huge screen inside. It's been under renovation since 2021, but that's a landmark.
Well, you had said earlier this was not a crime scene, but something tells me at some point there's been much crime right here. Am I right?
Yeah.
We are on the Sunset Strip. We are on the iconic Sunset Strip. And I've been to this theater many, many times for premieres, in line. Have you ever seen a film here, Tom?
Yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah.
It's just, if you love old school Hollywood, if you just love the tradition and history, and this place is magical. It is. And I hope they get the renovations done and it gets cranking again. I remember Tarantino wanted to do, or they actually did a movie marathon of Tarantino's movies back in 2019, where it was just around the clock. But that's a cool spot, man. And it looks cool, it feels cool. It's right on Sunset Boulevard. It is cool.
Well, where I live, Tom, it's a great story, that I was driving one time near Barham Boulevard, which you know by Warner Brothers Studios, and you go up a hill. I was at the stoplight, and I looked at a yellow Mustang next to me, bright yellow Mustang. It was Quentin Tarantino, and I was like, oh my God, Tarantino's next to me. And we're going up there trying to get his attention, like, love you, buddy. And he was focused on, I think, tunes. He's probably listened to Reservoir Dogs soundtrack with Stephen Wright. You know,
you seem like you'd be Tarantino's type. He'd dig you. Yeah, by the way, that's the LA Film School right over here, or at least one of the campuses. The cool thing is when you drive down Sunset, Kato, when you're coming from the west to the east, you can just see how things change. About 2.5 miles down is really the heart of it. You know, where the famous strip bars where Motley Crue used to hang out.
Crazy Girls. But more importantly, Tom, the most important thing is we're less than a quarter mile from our podcast studios.
We are.
Where Tom and I, of course, knock it out for you. And you know what? I honestly, Tom, the OJ that we did the tour, the Night Stalker tour, and this tour, I love doing these because I see stuff that I haven't seen before. And it's so great going to these little jaunts. I think the viewers love it.
Yeah, and you get a little ambiance here. You get the traffic of the city here in LA mid-afternoon on a Wednesday. I thought it would be warmer today, like I mentioned earlier.
I brought a coat.
You know, as you come down, you know, that way's the ocean, right? So straight down Sunset, you're going to run into Rockingham. You know, if you go that way, you'll hit the ocean all the way to the end. And then in the prime areas of Sunset Strip, where the nice clubs, the hotels, the restaurants are, right by the Comedy Store is this restaurant called Katana, right?
Yeah.
That's where I had my bachelor party in 2003, the night before I got married in Maui. I flew to Maui the day of the wedding, which was not a bright move, and we had dinner at Katana a few hours before my wedding in Maui.
Well, the Katz brothers are my buddies. They own Katana.
Yeah.
I see them a lot. And also CNN's right there, the headquarters of CNN LA. The LA Bureau, Los Angeles, is right in there in that building.
Yeah. That's where Larry King would do his shows during the OJ scandal.
Did Larry King show there at least 7 times?
I believe it.
With Larry there.
That was his headquarters for a while when he was out of DC. But yeah, this is Sunset Strip. That theater is just super cool. So, Kato, the other thing I wanted to do is kind of put a bow on the whole Charles Manson tour, and kind of tell everybody what happened to him. It's funny because the House of Cards, it all came crumbling down. It's not like they were arrested at a murder scene. It started with a car theft, right? And that's how one of the suspects was arrested. She starts talking, and then the detectives are able to peel back everything and connect all the dots, and it leads back to Charles Manson. So it was this huge puzzle that really, the case was broken by the fact that it had nothing to do with one of the murders. Right. And they start incriminating everybody else. They start yapping to try to save their skin, and it comes back to Manson, and that's when America was introduced to this creep show. And he was on the news. He just had that creepy element, that scary element about him. And you could see how he could be a sadistic killer. Right. And you could almost see the power that he would have with his cult members and how he could suck them in, which is how this all happened. It was that power that Charles Manson had, combined with a lot of drugs and these influential losers that he latched onto. And somehow he convinced them to just destroy lives, bring incredible fear to this entire city, and change the whole tone and complexion of the 1960s.
The Manson family was really the Manson dysfunctional family, as we know.
Camera's over there.
As I was saying, though, I was making a point to Tom that the Manson family actually became the Manson dysfunctional family. And Tom mentioned that the whole crime was solved because of something that had nothing to do with the crime. As always in some crime with any killer, it always comes down to something like a broken tail light or for some reason for being pulled over, and it always becomes a bigger thing. So it brings me back to the Simpson trial, because at one time I said, this probably isn't very important, but I heard this thumping on my wall, which is where they found the bloody glove. So, having said that...
Yeah. Kato, you made a good point, because it's always something stupid, or a lot of times it is. I'm watching that Timothy McVeigh Oklahoma City bombing movie on Netflix right now, and I spent a lot of time in Perry, Oklahoma, which is where Timothy McVeigh was arrested like an hour and 10 minutes after the bombing, because he didn't have a license plate on the back of his car.
Yeah.
I was right there. I met the sheriff that arrested him, and the crazy thing is he was supposed to be arraigned the next morning, and then he'd be on his way because it was a misdemeanor. He was carrying a gun, but the courts were too busy. They couldn't get him in. They had to stay another day. They get the composite drawing because of this great police work, but it's these types of mistakes. So the murders happened in 1969. Manson is convicted of first-degree murder in 1971, multiple counts of first-degree murder, even though he didn't actually murder anyone. He certainly wreaked havoc. He certainly injured people. He certainly, used blades and knives and swords, and he was involved in some of them, but he actually didn't actually murder anybody. They got him. Patricia Kreinwinkel, Leslie Van Houten, Susan Atkins, and Tex Watson also convicted, sentenced to death. And then, Kato, the next year, California abolishes the death penalty.
Right, and it's a complete turnaround. It becomes a 360, Tom, a circle, because Vincent Bugliosi, when I watched Helter Skelter, I always said I'd love to meet that guy, and sure enough I did. So as we had Marsha Clark, Chris Darden, prosecutors, it becomes a special case circumstances for Vincent Bugliosi, and as we know, he wrote the book and won that trial.
Mm-hmm. Yep, so Manson dies in prison in 2017. Susan Atkins passed away of brain cancer in prison, and let's see, Patricia Kreinwinkel is still incarcerated, and Tex Watson is as well. And one of them got out on parole.
And Susan Atkins is what you said?
Yeah, so Susan Atkins, she died of brain cancer.
She was brain cancer.
And one of them was released on parole, but they called themselves a family, and I wish they could have been executed. I wish they all could have just rotted in prison. Some of them still are, but...
Yeah, I just did a film, in Vegas, and I did a film of... I got to think of her name, but she was one of with the Tarantino film Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and she was one of the girls of the Manson gang.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that movie was violent at the end, typical of a Tarantino movie, but the alternate ending where Sharon Stone was saved, not murdered, they get the bad guys in a horrific way thanks to some dog food.
Margot Robbie.
Oh, of course, Margot Robbie. Margot Robbie, right here. And then she was in Westwood when she was watching the premiere of her movie as Sharon Tate. So, let's just remember the legacy of a Sharon Tate. She was a beautiful person, a talented actress with nothing but an extremely bright future in front of her, about to become a mother in 2 weeks until her life was snuffed out by these sick bastards, these cruel, non-human, just unbelievable what they did. And it changed a lot of things in this country, and it's a long time ago, but some of these things are still here. We went to the sites today, and that's our third major crime story tour that we've taken, Kato. And there's going to be more to come.
Much more. Crime does pay, as some will tell you, and this definitely is 1 degree of scandalous.
Yep. Okay. So thanks so much, everybody, for coming along on this tour with us. There will be more. We'll have a couple more episodes on the Charles Manson murders, and then we're going to be, little sneak peek here, we're going to be getting Gil Carrillo and Tom Lang back in studio very, very soon.
And also, if anybody out there subscribes and watches the show, if you have an idea of what you'd like to see, give us an idea, because I came up with an idea today. I mentioned to Tom, and I really think it'd be a great one, to get Dorothy Stratton's sister on the murder of Star 80, who was brutally murdered by Paul Schrader, played by Eric Roberts. Okay. I think that's a good one.
I'm down. Eric Roberts, your co-star in the movie that you just shot.
Yes. It'll be great thing to talk about.
Hey, by the way, is there going to be a premiere? Can we go?
It's not going to be for another year at least. But yes,
lobby for it right here, man. This will be open again. This will be open. We'll come back. Thanks, everybody. Glad we didn't get hit by anything here on Sunset Boulevard. Thanks for coming along on the tour with us today. Make sure you load us up with comments. Share our channel if you know some true crime fans that don't have it and haven't seen us yet. We appreciate that. listen to our podcast. What do you think of George's job today?
Well, I gotta say, George has been doing great, especially since I just saw his Jeep get towed.
Great.
It's sunset, 4 p.m.
Great.
He did great because his car's being towed.
Good, the cop got the message from me. Sorry, no, I'm kidding, George. Great might be pushing it. You started off on a bad note today, George. You've got 2 trained professionals here. We're in the car at Spahn Ranch, and you didn't put your seatbelt on. The dinging, was that annoying?
Yeah, it was dinging.
I was going to leave you at Spahn Ranch, George, and do it all on a cell phone.
I almost broke out in song doing Christmas music.
You're coming to Milwaukee with us if we do the Dahmer tour, okay? You're coming with us. George, thank you for your work today. We put some miles on. Thanks to everybody for watching. Make sure you listen to our audio podcast, follow the K-Train and me on social media, and we will see you very, very soon.